What's up? What's happening? Welcome here to Lacrosse Now. I'm Travis Eldridge. He is Tom Eschen. Our first Tuesday edition of Lacrosse Now here for the college lacrosse season. A lot of fun. We're going to get to our headlines from the college weekend coming up here in a bit.
Yeah, we've got a lot in store for you today. We'll talk to Hannah Nielsen, who just had a huge win with Michigan over Notre Dame over the weekend. And it's just great to have a full slate of games. We get to break them down, talk them over, and also some NLL Power Rankings make their return.
And the PLL announcing their first inaugural Pro Lacrosse Hall of Famers. We'll get to that coming up as well. But we're going to start with the weekend headlines in college lacrosse. And you really have to look no further than what happened on Sunday in Durham with Jacksonville taking down Duke, and that's headline number one.
Dolphins down the Devils. That is our headline. And I think this makes a far more reaching impact. You know, you look at games and you're like, oh, that's a nice win, obviously, for the program, the best they've ever had. But in terms of just the landscape of lacrosse, I don't want to make it sound too big, but it is substantial. I think a lot of it comes with belief now for some of these smaller conferences, might not be the blue blood teams, newer programs around the country say, well, if Jacksonville can do this and go out there and beat a team like Duke, I can too. And I think that's where it starts. You have to win these games to later on, whether that be 5, 10, 15 years down the road, to do it later on in the NCAA tournament. But it has to start somewhere, and it's continuing here. We've seen High Point do it in the past. We've seen other teams do it. But the more it happens, the more belief there is that it can happen on a wider scale.
I think that's maybe a little far-reaching in terms of wider scale in college lacrosse for little teams knowing that they can beat Duke. I think that's maybe a bit of a stretch. I will say, for Jacksonville, this is program changing. This is a program changing win for John Galloway and the Dolphins. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Okay, yeah, I would agree with that. I think that it serves as an example, and almost it can be helpful.
Well, yeah, but you could say that about High Point and Richmond, and like this
absolutely.
Is Bryant. This has been done before.
I completely agree with you.
But I just want to say, Jacksonville's not the first one to do it. But that's all I'm saying. There was a belief before this ever happened.
No, there's more belief now.
Yeah,
the more you add to the party, the better it is. Because I think if you get more teams, and I know right now High Point was bounced out of the top 20 after the Virginia loss, but you get more of those types of teams in that top 20, you get more in the conversation. My argument is that there's more.
Okay.
The more is the better, and that helps expand things in lacrosse. And for Jacksonville, being the next program up at the party, you said big for their program, but also on a wider scale, I think it makes a difference.
Yeah.
It's not the same small little guy. High Point once the High Point got another February win over a big club. It's a new one. There's someone new at the party.
Yeah, and I think what it says is that Jacksonville is here.
Absolutely.
Like they made a big splash by going out and bringing in John Galloway, and he was at the time when he was hired, he was young. They brought him in. They had Casey Powell, who was part of the staff initially, and I think all of that was to make a splash. Well, up until this point, the Dolphins hadn't really splashed around too much. They had some nice wins, or they played hard against teams.
Yeah.
This was the statement by John Galloway's team that, oh, hey, we're not just like here to hang around. We've seen Richmond and High Point do this too. We're not here just to hang around against a big boy. We can go there and beat them. And you watch that game against Duke, like you kept waiting for Duke to go on the run that then overtakes Jacksonville, because we've seen this before, especially in February games with some of these teams, like a team that's the underdog goes out, gets off to an early hot start, but then the team that is supposed to be the more talented roster comes back and eventually wins. You kept waiting for that to happen, but the Dolphins didn't let it happen. Like Duke is a really, really good team, but Jacksonville went there and they were the better team on Sunday. And I think a lot of it has to do with some of the pieces and what John Galloway has done, because it's one thing to go out and get a bunch of transfers, and we've seen this over and over again in the college game. It's another thing to get those transfers to come in and have the culture feel like this is a team. And that's what this Jacksonville team feels like, even just a couple of games into this season. And you bring in guys like a Max Walbaum from Tufts, Luke Milliken, who was a huge pickup in goal, because we've seen he started at North Carolina. So you know he's not going to be afraid of the stage.
No.
Like he's played all these teams before. So I think all those things are great. But remember, if you bring in these transfers, and it's really easy as a head coach to say, all right, transfers come in, we're going to have a competition during the preseason in the fall, and the best players are going to play. It's another thing to do that and then still have the culture that feels like a team and nobody's out to get each other. Everybody's rooting for each other. And that's what Jacksonville feels like to me. And it's why they went out there and played Hopkins really tough last week and had a chance to compete at Homewood and then go to Duke, and they get it done here this weekend.
Well, and it almost more so legitimizes the scheduling Jacksonville's done over the course of the tenure of John Galloway.
Yeah.
You know, we can say, oh, that's why they played such a tough schedule year after year after year to get to this point. It's not going to happen the first couple of seasons. It's going to happen over time. You have to take the time to build, and I think for any program, it's a good blueprint. I still think it's a good thing to sort of look at and be like, how did they do it? How are they able to get to this point in their program to where they could get to beat a team like this, to be able to say, yeah, we can go out there and compete with anybody on any day. And you know, Duke in February is Duke in February, but still got to go do that. Still got to go beat them, and then they did it in Durham.
The thing for Duke, and it's easy to say, like, this means a lot for Jacksonville, and quite frankly for Duke, I don't think it means a ton.
No, nothing for me.
I do think it's a wake-up call for a Duke team that has a lot of really talented guys who are still pretty young. Like, they brought in that great recruiting class the last couple of years, and they've got a lot of contributors who are freshmen and sophomores. I think this is a nice little, hey, it was Super Bowl Sunday. You guys probably were looking ahead to whatever you're doing after the game because you know, and Jacksonville came in and beat you. And so now, like, you got to remember that, yeah, just because there's a Duke across your chest, you got a top 5 ranking next to your name, like, doesn't mean that you're just going to win games. And so I think this happens to Duke all the time, and John Danowski is one of the great motivators in this sport. So I don't think it really means anything for Duke other than maybe a nice little wake-up call early. But for Jacksonville, this means everything, and it puts them right there in the conversation for being one of the teams to come out of the SoCon.
Yeah, and we've learned how important it is to peak at the right time. And I think the way Virginia's done it the last couple times around, they've peaked at the right time. And I think John Danowski, like you said, he's also a master at that. They're not going to peak right now in February. They're going to figure things out, what works best, and maybe try some things out, and that's what they've done in the past. And you saw that again this past weekend. But they have the talent. Now they just have to use these as learning experiences. And as they always say, you learn more from a loss than a win.
One more note, Jack Dolan, he's a guy who's been with this Dolphins program. Like, for him and some of these other grad student seniors, this one has to mean so much. So shout out to Jack. He had a big game. And
that's something that senior class is going to be able to walk away and say, we were the team that beat Duke. We took this program to a higher level. And that's something you look back years in the making and say that too. Recruits coming on campus will look back at this year and back at this win and say this could have been another launching point for us.
But it doesn't do them any good if they don't follow it up. Yeah. They got Mercer. We're taping this before they play Mercer here on Tuesday night. So if they lose to Mercer, then, well, all the great things we said about Jacksonville, now then you got to go back to the drawing board a bit.
I don't know if you got all the way back.
No, but you got to follow it up. You got to be consistent. One great win doesn't get you to the tournament. That's what they want. They want to get to the tournament.
Getting to the tournament is important.
Win a SoCon tournament
I'm looking
title.
A little bigger scale.
Yeah, but I'm just saying. All right, let's move on. Let's go to the
macro over here.
Let's go to the women's game here.
You got on me a little bit there.
Huh?
You got on me a little bit.
I did.
Okay. No.
I mean, you're just talking a little broad.
Yeah, I am.
I mean, it was a big win, but
it was
giving people hope. And
it is
across the country.
You add another team to the party is my explanation. You add somebody new. It's a new face getting a big win, and I think that matters.
This isn't some random school that's never been talked about before in Division I lacrosse.
They've never done this before.
Yeah, but they've been at least on the landscape.
Super Sunday statement from Michigan, Travis.
Yes.
Let's move along. That's our next headline of the weekend. Out in the women's game, it was a game I picked Notre Dame. I thought, okay, Michigan, it's a whole different feel for Michigan this year, and they're coming off a 3-9 season. Notre Dame's got a bunch of people back. Michigan played great. I mean, it was an outstanding performance on Super Bowl Sunday, and 2 big schools, but no one cared, and they went out there, and Michigan got the job done 11-7, their first ever top 5 win as a program. That's also something for them.
Huge.
I know it's Michigan is Michigan, but still, they've only been around since 2014. Like, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, remember, we talked about this last Thursday. This game actually happened during the Super Bowl.
Right.
Like, it started at 6 o'clock on Sunday night. But as we found out, as you're about to hear in talking with Hannah Nielsen, from Michigan's head coach, that interview is coming up here in a second, people were watching, whether it's 2 screens or just paying attention to this game. She was getting a lot of buzz. We talk about this in a second, so we're going to hit on this game a little bit more when we talk with Hannah. But I think this was really important because Michigan had that breakout year a couple of years ago. Molly Garrett helped put this program on the map, and Hannah Nielsen started making some big waves just a couple of years into her being the head coach there for the Wolverines. But last year was a struggle for a lot, I mean, not just for Michigan, but for a lot of teams, it was an all Big Ten schedule. It was different. So I think this win and having this big top 5 victory early in the season is a real momentum boost for this program. They'll have some other opportunities in the non-conference to compete against really good teams. And it really, I think, reminds everybody nationally that this is a team that can compete with the Northwesterns and the Marylands in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and it's always interesting. We talk about this with Hannah, is getting that first cycle of recruits through. So it's her 5th year there, and now they're all their own people that they have brought in. I always find it fascinating for what a coach does in those years in which they have their own recruits and they have that first 4-year cycle and what you do after that. And that often can define a program and how you do with that program and how long you are. And obviously they've been able to recycle and retool and do it in such a good way. The grad student, Ariel Weissman, 13 saves. She stopped 7 free position shots against Notre Dame. I mean, I saw 2 for 9. I was like, that's unbelievably good. So, I mean, you got a goalie that can step up and make big saves in really big spots. Good for Michigan in getting this win.
And Caitlin Meade, 4 goals for the Wolverines. We talk about her with Hannah Nielsen coming up. So stay tuned for more on this game there.
They got 2 more games, and then they go to Towson February 27th. That should be their next big test.
All right.
That'll be interesting there.
Keep an eye on that.
Next headline.
A Syracuse stomping.
Ooh.
So we talked about on Thursday who needed to make the best first impression. And I said Syracuse, and I gave them this whole thing like, there are people voting you out of the top 20.
I know.
I think all they need, I mean, look, it was Holy Cross, but they led 10-0. They were up 19 to, I think, 3.
It was,
At one point, they finished off going 28-5. And they went out there, and despite the fact that, they were supposed to win this game, it reminded everybody that, they've got a couple of All-Americans in the midfield. Owen Seabald, despite the fact that Owen Hiltz is out, Owen Seabald goes out there and has a terrific game at attack. Jacob Fopp was, I think, lost only 2 or 3 faceoffs the entire day. They still have Brett Kennedy defensively, who's wearing number 11. The team is still really talented. So, they're missing some pieces. Who knows if they have the entire collection to be ready for championship weekend right now. But you still have to remember that Syracuse lacrosse and the talent that has been brought in, and then the coaching staff that they have, like they still have to be considered as maybe one of the top 10, top 15 teams in the country, even if they're unproven, because that's what you give some of these other teams and programs, because you just know the talent that's on the roster. And I think that's what Syracuse showed. I mean, you have to remember that outside of Jamie Trimboli, who finally graduated after he got his extra years of eligibility, they still returned 2/3 of the midfield that was considered maybe the most talented in the country going into last year, and they proved it. Brendan Curry had 6 points. Tucker Dordovic had 5 goals. I mentioned Seabald. Griffin Cook was a really highly regarded recruit coming out of high school. He slid into that midfield unit. So they've got so many great pieces. And then we saw Bobby Gavin step in and goal. And now he didn't have to do a ton, but he stepped in and said, okay, I can be a starting goalie for this team. I know what it's like to compete in the ACC. This, to me, was exactly what Syracuse needed to do, and they took care of business.
You know, everything you said is true. I don't disagree with anything when you look at the stats and what happened in the game and the statement that they made. But I think there's something beyond all of that with this team that we saw at the end of last year, and that this is probably a tighter group than maybe you think. You know, we said everybody has guys coming back for 5th year, 6th years, what have you. But they were brought together by some outside factors at the end of last season. And all the stories and the reports that came out was that this is a very tight-knit group and that they rallied around each other. And then, we know that, they went to the tournament. Things didn't go very well then.
Yeah.
But it's like at that point, you just sort of figure out as you go. You only have to imagine that those bonds got even tighter this year. And with some of the talk before the season, like we said, with some of the rankings and what have you, that could only make this bond stronger. So I think that is maybe an underestimated intangible about this Syracuse team, is that we can't remember what happened at the end of last year. Everything surrounded Chase Scanlon, and the fact that the rest of the guys on the team were very unified in how they felt about the whole thing. And to have that kind of unity, and you can see that now on the field, and it just makes a big difference. And you look at the score, that's great. And I just really believe that when things are tough, this group's going to play really hard for each other. And none bigger example than Sebald himself. I mean, he has the 5 goals in the debut. He's a guy who didn't start. He was a guy off the bench as an attackman, ran out of the midfield a little bit until the end of last year when things were a little sketchy and all that. Named a captain going into this season. He comes out as a great performance. I mean, what a story. What a guy for everybody else to rally around. So this is a team, I think, that's really tight-knit, and that really helps you win games, and big ones at that. And they'll be tested, as we know, in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, here we go. Like,
here we go.
You get a win, and now you got Maryland coming to the Dome, and you take on Virginia. Like those, we're going to find out a lot. Sunday afternoon, Maryland Cuse. It is a gigantic day in the Carrier Dome. Gary Gates' numbers being retired. Katie Rowan is being honored before the women's game. It is a huge Sunday, and we're going to learn a lot more about this Syracuse team. But so far, I think they just reminded everybody, hey, we're still here, and this program hasn't gone anywhere.
Yeah,
and I think that was
factor as well. There's a chip on the shoulder.
Yeah,
there.
I think that was what was needed to happen this past week, and it's exactly what they did.
Maybe some life, this added to this program for a whole bunch of different reasons that desperately needed, other than just a new coach.
Yeah,
Gary Gay makes a difference, but there's other things that help that as well and invigorate you a bit and say, okay, let's get back to what Syracuse lacrosse is all about.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, what's our next headline here, Travis?
We're going to the BC women here, and it's the Eagles.
High above
the pack.
Wow.
I mean, look.
Finishing the sentence.
First off, the fact that this game was played indoors is a crime. I know there's a lot of logistics that go into it, but it was like 50 degrees on Saturday in Boston. So I wish this game would have been played outside. But this is one of the games of the weekend. You've got Boston College and Northwestern doing battle. Charlotte North's first game since winning the Tewaaraton. And man, did the Eagles. Look, I know Izzy Skane's not playing for Northwestern, but they've known that since the fall. And so this is a Northwestern team that I think people still believe is one of the top 5, top 10 teams in the country. And I think they're going to be there all year. But Boston College made a gigantic statement. They beat them by 9 goals, 18-9. Charlotte North, who, it's not she's not surprising anybody. You know what she does. She scored 7 goals. Against a Northwestern defense that brings back a lot. That was a Final Four team last year. Charlotte North put on an absolute show. This offense just exploded. They score 18, and they run away from a team that was considered top 5 in the country. And still, quite frankly, even with the loss, I still have them in my top 6, 7, or 8 because Northwestern, I still think is going to be really, really good. So that, I think, to me, just proved it was a reminder to everybody just how talented Boston College is and why they're the defending champs.
Yeah, I wasn't, I had argued about North Carolina, and I still will here in a moment, but I believe that Charlotte North has taken the next step from just outstanding talent to outstanding, like the Tom Brady effect, in which you make everybody, you are a culture. You bring a culture with you to a program. And watching her in that game after goals, she's bringing everybody in to talk things over and explain things. And I got to believe that her relationship with Kayla Traynor, I remember, was so strong at BC. Kayla did the same thing at Syracuse. And she sees the importance of the nuances. And obviously, Charlotte North is a perfectionist. She wants to be the best and the greatest, and she wants her teammates to do the same. And I know she had 7 goals, but they are stacked. Boston College offensively has a very strong. There was a goal that Belle Smith had. She looked like she was shot out of a cannon. Coming out from the fan, she was streaking towards the goal, went behind the back. She had 3 goals, and she's just the next coming of one of the great women's lacrosse players that we're going to see over the next few years here. They've got a lot of talent. Their defense as a whole ended up picking up, 13 ground balls combined. And they dominated that part of the game. They just had it the entire game. The ball, they put on 41 total shots, 30 on cage. Madison Doucette made 12 saves. It's not like she was very poor in this game. It was just the fact that BC just peppered her all day long, and I think we're going to see a lot of that this year.
Yeah, the fact that, because a lot of these games, let's be honest, like when you start to get up as much as BC is, it's easy to give up a couple more and have this be like an 18-13 type game.
Right.
For them to also still hold Northwestern to just 9 goals, I think sends a very equal amount of statement as what the offense did. Charlotte North was virtually unstoppable in that game. You see some of the highlights coming out where she's dodging 2, 3, 4 defenders and slice. Like what she is doing is virtually unstoppable by defenses. Like, good luck. Because like before, if you wanted to pack it in and you wanted to force somebody to shoot from the outside, that's the game plan. But like she can shoot from the outside. She can do it from there. So like she has taken away, it's going to take masterful game plans from defensive coordinators and head coaches around the country trying to figure out how you stop her. Oh, and by the way, also don't get beat by everybody else that they have.
I mean, they might not even win their own conference anyway, but because North Carolina,
they're really good.
I called the game North Carolina JMU, and you look at the defense that could match up in that way. And of course, I know they played last year, and North Carolina only lost by 1. So I really want to see a rematch there because.
Well, we're going to. We may see it 3 or 4 times this year.
I know. I'm just saying I'm really looking forward to that because Jamie Ortega is, I don't know, it's hard to, they're very different players, Jamie Ortega and Charlotte North, but they have the same impact on their team. Jamie Ortega had 3 assists against James Madison. It was a career high in assists. So the fact that she's adding some things to her game and recognizing even more than ever what she needs to do to help her team win, I think is impactful. Ever since they say, oh, Katie Hogue's on, Caitlin Wurzberger, I know Katie Hogue was awesome. Caitlin Wurzberger might be just as awesome. And she goes off with 3 goals, 4 assists in that game. The offense running through a sophomore. You can see it and feel it with North Carolina. The continuity is really there this year once again. They're going to be, I think they're up there about, I know our headline was high above the rest.
Well,
North Carolina is step for step with them.
So that's what I was going to ask you, because you saw North Carolina up close. How close are they to what we saw from BC?
I think they're extremely.
They're right there.
They went up against, and I know that James Madison, or they're a different conference. Everything else is a little changed there, but they had a veteran squad coming into that game, and you just saw over time North Carolina just wear them away with their depth and talent and athleticism. And I was impressed with North Carolina. James Madison, put up their best fight, but at the end of the day, the score, ended up being 15-8 North Carolina. You're like, wow, like they just sort of wore away at them over time. And this North Carolina team, it went up against a good team too. And I don't think that should be underestimated, that JMU had a veteran squad they were bringing in, and they struggled to score at times. And at the other end, I mean, the defense by North Carolina with Emma Trenchard and Knowles and the back end there are so good with Moreno behind them. It's going to be very tough for teams to score. And you have a 1-2 punch. Trenchard and Knowles, those are 2 of the best defenders in the country. I don't think Knowles gets enough credit for what she does on a daily basis.
Well, we've seen that over the last couple of years with North Carolina. Defensively, it's like, okay, they're going to score, but like, we've seen it when they dueled out with Syracuse last year a couple of times, that like Syracuse early on kept pace. It's like, all right, we're trading goals. But at some point, like, trading goals isn't going to work because they have so much defensively, it's going to be impossible to keep up. That's how they beat you.
Yeah, right. And that's why that's going to be a great matchup. Like, I don't want to underestimate Boston College, but North Carolina should not be undersold because they are just as talented, in my opinion.
Okay, I don't think they're being undersold.
Our headline was that BC's separating themselves from the rest.
It's headlines, We're trying to stir the pot a little bit. All right, let's go.
It's stirred. It is moving.
Let's go to our final headline. We go back to the men's game, and it's the tip-top Terps because they are the new number 1 team in the Inside Lacrosse media poll this week, despite Virginia, who was the number 1 team, still being undefeated. But Maryland made a really big statement. We talked about this game last week, what Loyola maybe needed to do, and they did not do it. They got run out of College Park. The Terps scoring 20 goals for the second consecutive game here to start the year. Are they didn't get my number 1 vote. I'll get to that in a second. Are they, in your mind, the best team in the country right now?
I haven't seen enough from the Ivy League. I haven't seen anything from the Ivy League yet. I don't know. I mean, I want to see what Yale looks like. So I don't think we can say that until we've seen everybody play. That's my answer.
Okay.
At the end of the day.
Okay. Well,
I don't think we haven't seen everybody play yet, so I can't go out and say that Maryland's the number 1 team automatically because we haven't seen everybody.
Maryland's win over Loyola to me was extremely impressive, and I was very close to voting them the number 1 team over Virginia after Virginia held on against High Point. However, I have a really hard time just flip-flopping and moving the number 1 team out of the top spot when you continue to win games, because we don't ask by how many at the end of the season. They ask if you win or lose.
Maryland did beat High Point by 8.
Yeah, they did.
Virginia won by 1.
But you can't just compare. I know that's what people do. I still have a really hard time moving them out of the top spot when you won the game. For for me with the Virginia thing, they led 10-6. They let High Point get back into the game late, and they got a great save from Matthew Nunes to save the game. But to me, it was a game that Virginia very much at times felt like they were in control, and they slipped up and they weren't sharp and they let them back in the game. Something you would expect from a team in February.
Does Maryland not have 2 better wins than Virginia right now?
Sure, yeah, but we're not asking about who is the best wins right now because you have to have a little bit of an eye test and just a feel for who do you think is the best team. And I think Virginia is just as talented, if not more so, than Maryland right now. And they're the 2-time defending champs.
I know, and I realize that. And I do think that with Maryland coming in this year with all those transfers, it's really been interesting because you always wonder what those transfers will do and what impact they'll make. And at the end of the day, it's like, they're just really talented lacrosse players. I think they'll be fine. You know, because some transfers, it depends on how good you are. Maryland brought in studs. Jonathan Donville and Keegan Kahn have been great for them. Donville, 5 goals and an assist in 2 games. Kahn, 5 goals, 6 assists in 2 games.
They're really good.
They've acclimated so much faster than I thought they would. Where normally this conversation, I might side with you. But just because Maryland has all of a sudden come together quicker than anybody could have imagined. I guess I didn't really, you sort of forget when you think about, oh, they got some new players in there, going to take time to gel. They're already gelled.
Yeah.
These guys are really good at lacrosse. Like, at the end of the day, yeah, they're good lacrosse players. You're going to play with together, and everything's going to be fine. And I think for Maryland, that's what has shown, that you add talent to talent, and things are going to go pretty well. And I know Virginia, they bring back continuity and have all of that going for them, but Maryland seems like they already have it.
Yeah, but I could argue that continuity, that Virginia learned a lot about themselves in this win over High Point, and mainly that they've, I think, found their goalie. I mean, how many times did Alex Rode in these 2 championship runs bail them out? And they need, and you talk to Lars Tiffany, the way that they like to play, they need a guy who can save the ball. Because they're going to, goalies just theoretically in a Lars Tiffany type system and are going to need to make stops. Like they relied on Alex Rode. Lars Tiffany told us when we interviewed him, a month or so ago, like, we need guys that are going to make stops. And that's exactly what Matthew Nunes did as a freshman. So I think they learned a lot about him, which is going to hopefully pay off for them throughout the season in that, like, hey, this is a guy that we can trust. Now, hopefully the defense, everybody plays better in front of him so he doesn't have to make some of those plays. Yeah. But I think that was a nice lesson. I also think, like High Point, the first time you play a highly ranked team like that, and Maryland is one thing. But as soon as you start losing some of those games, then all of a sudden the urgency steps up. I think there was a sense of urgency for High Point, especially after Colgate took them to overtime on Friday.
Right.
I think this was a little different High Point team than Maryland saw. Not saying that Maryland's win over High Point isn't more impressive than what Virginia did, but there was a sense of urgency for High Point knowing, hey, we didn't get Maryland and we didn't give them our best shot, we thought, and then Colgate gave us everything we could handle. They escaped there. Like, it was like, all right, let's get this thing going. So I will say that. The other thing I learned about this result, Maryland and Loyola, let's remember about this Loyola team. They did this last year. Like, the team that happened at the end of the year that brought everybody back is the same team that at the beginning of last year we went, huh? Are they really a tournament team? Because it wasn't until like maybe the last 2 weeks of the regular season last year that the Greyhounds were a legitimate tournament contender. They lost to Towson 5-3 on the road.
I forgot
they
about
scored
that game.
3 goals in a loss on the road to Towson, and that was I think it was in early March. So let's not forget that this same group of Loyola guys was the same group that got off to a kind of bumpy road start last year in the first couple of months and then figured it out. So I don't think we need to panic on Loyola, but it was not a good start to the season for them.
If Maryland and Virginia played tomorrow, who wins that game?
That's a really good question. I have no idea. It's the same way that when Maryland and Syracuse play on Sunday, I have no idea what we're going to get.
I just think that you might have a different result tomorrow than you might in May between those.
That's
two
true.
teams.
I
would personally think if Maryland plays Virginia tomorrow, they win. I don't know if that happens in the NCAA tournament.
Okay.
So that's my thought on that.
All right.
I don't think you're going to answer. So.
I'm not. I really have no idea.
Okay. You're honest. That's
why I like to see these games play out.
That's perfectly fine. All right. So Michigan, like we said, had a huge win on the women's side of things over Notre Dame. We caught up with their head coach, Hannah Nielsen. So here is that interview. So the head coach of Michigan joins us now, Hannah Nielsen. Hannah, appreciate you coming on. And what a win for you guys over the weekend. I guess, do you feel like you made a statement maybe to the rest of the country in taking down Notre Dame?
Yeah, I guess so. It certainly made for a happy Monday. And I think, statements aside, I'm just happy for our girls. They've been working really, really hard for not only the 5 weeks of preseason, but for the, 4 or 5 months beyond that. So certainly good to start the weekend 2-0.
Now, I think for you guys, this has to have been an interesting experience over the last couple of years, because it was a couple of years ago, you guys burst onto the scene, accomplished a lot of program firsts, and then there's like this lull because it's, hey, now we have expectations and now we have to try to live up to them. How have you found this process and the transition of being accomplishing all these firsts and now having the opportunity to accomplish a big first, obviously, this weekend, but there's less of them now for you guys because you've accomplished great things already?
Yeah, I think we burst onto the scene and we were excited for that 2020 season, which, COVID was there's no good timing for COVID to happen, right? But for us, I felt like that was going to be a special year. So, certainly last year was disappointing. And I think almost last year kind of has us in that same mentality of we've got a point to prove again. And I like being in that position. And I think, we didn't practice yesterday, but the message to the girls today was great. We did a great job. However, now the target's on our back and people know who we are again, and it's playing in a different mindset. It certainly is a mindset shift of when people know who you are and are preparing a little more for you, as opposed to being shocked by you when you come out relatively unnamed. So we like the position we're in. I'm happy to be back in that position of being kind of hunted, so to speak, and being known again. And, it'll be fun to be in that position for the rest of the season, hopefully.
Yeah, it's your, fifth season now? Is that right, Hannah?
Yeah, fifth season, which, a couple of years of time was warped there for the last kind of 8 months. Yeah. But going into season 5.
Yeah, so it's, obviously the program sort of gets to recycle now a bit, now that you've been there for a full class. Is that a little bit part of that mentality of a reset now heading in to year number 5 here with you in Ann Arbor?
Yeah, I think so. I truly believe this is the most talented group we've ever had. We've always had athletes, we've always had hard workers and amazing student athletes and people that were so bought in, and we developed them. But I truly do think that, we've got a couple of full recruiting classes in now. Almost the majority of the team now are our recruits, coupled with a senior class that has truly bought into our coaching style and our philosophy. And so that's exciting. And it is a reset. I almost think it's, you've had that first 4-year cycle and here we go again.
Now, we were joking before we got on. You had quite the competition to go head-to-head with viewership-wise this weekend. You're playing during the Super Bowl, which is kind of a unique experience. How much of the Super Bowl did you or the team actually see?
We got on the bus and the girls were so excited, so rowdy. We truly forgot there was another game. I remember getting my iPad out at some point after watching a little bit of the film, right? And I was like, oh, there's another game. And I saw right when the Rams won. I love watching celebrations when teams win big, love watching the national championship celebrations. And so I watched the celebration and then I got some sleep.
Was there any talk about it heading into the game, like knowing what else was going on in the world at that time, or was it just blinders?
We were pretty much had the blinders on, and we had a walkthrough at Notre Dame earlier in the day, and someone made a joke like, where are the appetizer to the Super Bowl or something, like Happy Super Bowl Sunday, but it was a joke. The girls were so locked in, and I think that showed. No one really was focused anywhere else other than where our feet were in that facility, and I think that showed.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's one of those unique experiences. But as you were saying, you look at the evidence, you were getting people were blowing up your phone. So people made sure they were locked in, as they should be, because it was a terrific game for you guys.
Yeah, I think, it's kind of a cool time slot, the 6 p.m. on a Sunday night. There's no other games going on. So everyone that cares about women's lacrosse, was watching. And yeah, that was truly evidence. I was getting a lot of messages from fellow coaches and friends and family. And I think there's a lot of split screens going on from my understanding as well.
Yeah, we joked about it before, like second screen that thing. I was pumped for your game. I was like, yeah, we got to have another, whatever way you want to watch. That's the way to go. Mentioning, obviously the magnitude of this game going against Notre Dame so early in the season, how much did playing that Big Ten schedule prepare you for tough game? Because that, like we've talked about before on both sides, that's a gauntlet. How do you think that impacted your approach and your, ability to step up for this moment?
Yeah, the girls that are on the field, all they've played for the last year is tough games. And, I think almost playing out of conference, there was that like lack of pressure going in as well. Last year was such a pressure-filled season. Every game had so much riding on it in terms of seeding, and that was going to matter come the end of the year. And of course, this game mattered on Sunday, but in the grand scheme of things, it's an early game in February, and it might help us going forward in NCAA rankings and seedings, hopefully. But we almost like the ability to play without the pressure of Big Ten, consequences was just so nice. And that was the message going in, like, just go out and play. There's going to be a winner and a loser. If we do these things, we'll be happy with whichever way it goes. And the girls really took that to heart and went out and played their butts off.
Well, it's also one of those games that, like, you go to Michigan to play play other teams like a Notre Dame, and nothing again. You obviously play great schools in the Big Ten, but like those out of conference games are one of the reasons you want to suit up in the maize and blue.
Yeah, 100%. That's funny. I literally said that to the girls on Sunday in the hotel meeting room. I was like, nervous is good. I think, nerves are meant to be there. That's a great thing. And this is exactly why you chose to come here. You didn't come here to beat teams by 20 every single game. No one wants that. You want hard games. You want great competition like Notre Dame and the ACC and the Big Ten. And, that was, the girls got up for it, and they didn't let their nerves take over, and they were able to handle it really maturely.
Yeah, you mentioned the maturity of this team, and like you said, you've recycled a couple of these classes now. You're seeing, your athletes now in their senior year and whatnot. I want to ask about Caitlin Meade and seeing, the ability to step up in the place of someone like Amali Garrett, who left, of course, and seeing some of these seniors. Caitlin Meade, someone who hasn't been one of your premier, people on offense coming in a big game, and she stepped up. What's that like for you to see that maturation as a coach?
Yeah, I've seen it every day in practice. And I think, again, someone like a Caitlin has been really, negatively affected by the COVID. She was going to have a blow up year in 2020. And then last year, I thought she played amazing, but it was just such stiff competition. And we were shut down so many different times that her development, the whole team's development really suffered. And so she's someone that she's the fittest on the team. She comes in and crushes the fitness test. She's, someone after the game was like, Caitlin Meade is a transformer, like in terms of like the Transformer, the Marvel character. Like, she is just a absolute unit. And to see her get the recognition that she deserves because of the hard work she's put in, throughout it all is just, it's really rewarding, hopefully for her, but for us as coaches as well. And her and Erin Garvey and a bunch of the other seniors who have been through a lot for them to get that big win, one of the biggest ones in their career, was really, really fun.
So I think the biggest question is, how do you build off of this? Because like there has to be, it's almost like a downer for any game you have to play next after you experience that. How do you build on this?
Yeah, that's going to be the challenge. And they haven't been in this position. We've already, again, we joked in the office earlier that, it's like they've matured overnight, because one of our starters came in and we're like, we know we have to keep this up. And we're like, wow, those words have never been spoken before. And for them to recognize it is, I think it's, for me, and what I say to them a lot is every time we play, you have to picture that, someone's in the stands watching us for the first and last time. And what are they going to say about Michigan lacrosse? And I think if we can go into every game with that mentality, the opponent can be faceless. It's about us. It's what we do and what we represent and how we want to play to our values. And I think that's the messaging going forward throughout out of conference, and certainly once we get into the Big Ten as well.
Yeah, fun seeing you guys out there and getting off to such a good start. 2-0 already. Arizona State on Friday. So that's next, right? That's the only thing that you guys are looking at, right?
Absolutely. Game 3, ready to go.
Hannah, we appreciate the time. Thank you so much, and good luck on Friday.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Good to see you.
Hannah. Big shout out to Hannah Nielsen for taking some time, not too long after they knocked off Notre Dame and didn't watch much of the Super Bowl.
That was incredible. I was like, that's awesome. Like, that's what you want in a coach. Like,
yeah.
She is so focused and she watched film before even looking at I was watching some film. I was like, oh, another game on? That's amazing.
Yeah, that's some like legitimate focus in to do that.
That's greatness right there. That's what it's all about. That's how you build. That's how you do it. That's how you win.
Speaking of greatness, the Premier Lacrosse League announcing their inaugural class for the Pro Lacrosse Hall of Fame that they are unveiling. We've got, for the people watching on YouTube and here on LSN, we've got a whole full screen of the the list of people. I'll go through them. At the attack spot, I mean, there's really no surprises here. John Grant Jr., Mark Millen, Casey Powell. In the midfield, you got Gary Gate, Jay Gilbert, and Matt Strebel. Paul Cantabene at the faceoff X. John Gagliardi, Pat McCabe, Nicky Polanco defensively, and Brian Doherty, the initial goalie going into this inaugural class. Really, I mean, you could argue there's other guys. There are plenty of guys that are deserving to be into this Hall of Fame, but I don't know if there's any one of these guys you can take off. So I won't argue that. I just will say that I had the lucky chance of doing Casey Powell's final game as a professional. It was at Harvard Stadium. They were playing the Cannons. And that day will always be etched in my memory as one of my favorite I've ever been a part of in professional lacrosse history. Because on that day, Casey Powell went out there and scored a couple of goals against the Cannons. It was a 5 o'clock game. And at that point, he actually pulled ahead of John Grant Jr. in all-time points. And so he retired as the all-time points leader in Major League Lacrosse history. Only for John Grant Jr. in a game at 7 o'clock on Long Island for the Ohio Machine to go out and score 10 goals to not only beat Casey Powell, but to then break Major League Lacrosse's record for most goals in a single game. It was one of the coolest situations I think I've ever been a part of. And on top of all of the individual accomplishments, the win by the Ohio Machine got them into the playoffs and knocked the Cannons from the postseason, even after the Cannons had beat the Florida Launch earlier in the day. It was a wild final Saturday of the regular season in Major League Lacrosse. Will always be one of my favorites. And it was one where two legends who are now going into this first class in the Hall of Fame, both were a major, major part of it.
Yeah, and I think that's, like, you just touched on a story, and I think that that's what's so important about having something like this, is that you need to be able to, in a league, in a sport, be able to look back on history and remember games, and there's that a little bit, but now you got names and you got positions, and, like, yeah, everyone knows some of the top guys over the years, but now you got, remember, when and Gagliardi did this. It's like you get to see that, out in writing and get some of these people that might not have been the first people that come to your mind when it comes to the big highlights or whatever have you. You get to do that and really appreciate the history of the sport in the professional sense. And
yes.
In the field game as well, we should denote this is the
field.
This is a field version. They don't call it that for one reason or another. We're not going to get into that right now. But it is important, and I appreciate the fact that they're going to put this down and honor these people and tell these stories, because that's what you have at the end of the day. You have a legacy you want to leave, and now there's been enough of pro lacrosse in the field sport that you can tell those stories. And this gives you a vehicle to do so, which is why this is so important.
I mean, you think about it. Gary Gate in 2005 with the then Baltimore Bayhawks was a player coach and won the championship teaming up with John Grant Jr. and Mikey Powell. I mean, the stories that, and the league has done a nice job posting some different video montages of some of these guys to tell some of these stories, but the stories about these guys and playing professional lacrosse and what they've done for the sport and what they accomplished individually and the type of players they are, just incredible. So the stories, I hope, will continue to be told, because they're some really, really special ones and cool ones.
And then like you said, all of them deserve it, and it gives someone else something to strive for, and hope for down the line. And I think that's important too, because everybody in every league, every professional league has something like this.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Because there's already a college iteration. You see the college, and there's a pro football and a college football Hall of Fame. So you need something like this in the pro game, and I know NLL has it. It hasn't been revisited in a few years, but you need this to be a part of what makes you a league.
By the way, if you want to go blast from the past, Joe Keegan on Twitter posted all 10 goals of John Grant Jr.'s 10-goal game from there. So go take a look at those. Paul Carcaterra and Eamon McEnany were on the call for that game, and they were terrific. My favorite moment was before number 10, Eamon McEnany going, "Give it to Junior!" Game was out of reach, so that was all that mattered. Get him number 10, and they did. And, of course, it was a BTB. Because
that's...
I think like 4 of the 10 goals were behind the back, which is just absurd.
One of my favorite moments so far from the podcast this season was asking Joey Epstein about Junior.
Yeah.
And like he did in practice and some of the subtleties and like not really shying away from doing that kind of stuff.
He's still good.
Yeah.
Like he still could go out. We said it. He still could go out there in the NLL and probably get like 3 or 4 goals in a game.
Yeah.
He may not be able to move the next day.
Right. Not many
Junior.
would, let's be honest.
That's true. You're right. Speaking of the NLL,
let's roll.
Let's finish up the show with our NLL Power Rankings. It's been a little while.
Yeah,
since
it's time to revisit a bit.
Revisited these. We've had a number of weeks. We've had some slower weeks throughout the holiday break, some COVID issues, but it seems like we've kind of turned the corner. Things are getting rolling normally here in the NLL, and we've got a new team atop the power ranking.
Yes, we're going with Halifax at the top of our rankings right now at this point of the season. February 15th is today. They got a couple of the wins over Toronto. They just beat Philly, a game in which they trailed 8-7 with 7 minutes to go. They scored 3 straight to come back and win. As you can see, here are all of our teams that we are ranking. But we'll start talking about Halifax here. Warren Hill, 36 saves in that game. He's second in the league in goals against average. Their second best defensive team in the league is Halifax. Sort of, they found their way a little bit here and back to maybe that prime that we felt in 2020 when they came on the scene and did it very loudly.
Yeah, I mean, that year, they were one of the teams that were hurt the most by the fact that the pandemic ended the season. We're going to get to Buffalo here in a second because they dropped down from the top spot after they lost their first game of the year this past weekend against Toronto. I think the impressive thing for me about the Thunderbirds here is nobody has been hit by the COVID situation worse than them because of different things with government regulations in Halifax. They haven't been able to play at home for 2 games. They had to play down in Hamilton in Toronto's home arena, and it's really good to see Cody Jamieson back healthy. He's got 4 games. He has 14 points. He's, I think, 5th on the team, and he's only played in 4 of the 6 games so far. So good. I mean, this dude is an absolute legend, talking about legends of the sport. Absolute legend, and it's really good to see him back healthy. And if he can stay healthy, he is going to be a really, really key piece for them making another push.
Yeah, absolutely. And we put the Bandits to 2. And we want to explain that. They split with Toronto, and Thunderbirds beat Toronto twice. That they don't really have a great win outside of that. They beat Calgary, Rochester a couple times, Georgia, who's a little down, the Riptide. I personally fought for this against Travis in our break room there, and I won the battle. But I believe that the Bandits, yes, they are talented. You look at that on paper. Dane Smith, second in league in assists. They're the best scoring team in the league. So you look at the Bandits, they got all the makings of a good team and the best team. But Halifax, at this point, it's just a little bit better of a resume, in my opinion. Yeah,
I still think the Bandits are the most talented team in the league, at least from what we've seen so far. They got off to a slow start against Toronto this past weekend. It's tough. Then you go up to Toronto right now, there's no fans. And so I think it was a very different atmosphere for the Bandits because, they closed the game. I don't think there's any reason to panic from this loss. They closed the game actually pretty strong against the Rock. They just couldn't get past Nick Rose, who had a really nice game with 37 saves. They already do have a win over Toronto, and I'm okay with the Bandits. 6-1. The real travesty in this is we probably could have solved this already on the field or on the floor, but Halifax and Buffalo had a game that had to be postponed 2 or 3 weeks ago because of the COVID situation. So we should have already seen these teams play. Game's been moved. So hopefully we get this answer soon.
Steve Priolo playing really well for them at 33 years old. Doing it, one of these back-end defensive guys, backdoor, 13 block shots. That leads the league. Guy putting his body on the line. One of the more interesting characters in the league, but great personality. So shout out to Steve for doing it. And with Matt Vince, behind him, another ageless wonder. If you will.
Unbelievable. Number 3, another 6-1 team, the San Diego Seals, who have quietly put themselves right here in the mix. The Seals lost that opener against Vancouver, and it was and I mean, I said it. I don't know what does this mean for San Diego? They got some different pieces they got to figure out. They're just fine. They've won 6 in a row. One thing to note, they haven't played anybody from the East.
Yeah.
And so it will be very interesting. They've done a nice job beating some of the teams in the West, but we've talked about this West division. It's just very difficult to figure out who's really good. Everybody's kind of beating each other up. San Diego at the moment is kind of been the class of that division. I'll be very interested to see when we start seeing them play a couple of the teams in the East, how they hold up.
Yeah, it's interesting because we went into the year, but like San Diego offense, Dane Dobie, yeah, he's got 21 goals. That's third in the league. Frank Scigliano's been the best goalie in the league this year. 7.40 goals against average. That is first in the league. I know he missed a game or two here and there, but I mean, they're playing good defense, and I think that that's really important, and that's scary, the fact that they've gone on this run since that opening loss. And yeah, we could put them a little bit higher, but they just have that great win at Colorado, 13-4. Other than that, they beat some of those other teams that are a little bit lower in our rankings, so that's why we put San Diego where they are right now.
Which brings us to Toronto and Colorado, a couple of teams you've already hit on. We got Toronto at 4, Colorado at 5. I'll hit on Toronto real quick. 3 straight wins. This is a team that was right there around 500. They've now put themselves in the conversation of being a top 5 team in this league. And shout out to Tom Schreiber. Tallied his 300th career point this past weekend. 4 goals and 2 assists. I mentioned Nick Rose was really good defensively. If Tom Schreiber's right, and he puts up numbers like this, Toronto can compete with some of the best in the East. They need some of those pieces, him and Rob Hellier, to be the guys that they've been a couple years ago.
And on the back end for them, Mitch DeSnoo and Brad Cree, first and second in the league in forced turnovers, 4th and 5th in loose balls. So they're getting the job done on the back end as well. Nice win over the weekend, of course, like we said, against Buffalo.
Yeah. Colorado, and this hits on Saskatchewan, who we have in number 9. Very interested to see this weekend's game. The two of them play on Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern time. I'm very interested because they're in completely different spots in our power rankings. You got Colorado at 5-2, Saskatchewan at 9 at 2-5, and quite frankly, I could see this game going either way.
Yeah.
Because the Rush have 4 one-goal games so far this year, and we know there's talent on that roster. We keep saying it. We're just waiting for it to show up. I would be very interested to see how Sunday's game goes.
Yeah, Rush have to get a little bit more out of the outside the big guys. They after Matthews and Church and Keenan. Lintner has just 16 points. Schattler has 16. They need a couple more guys to bump themselves up there a little bit and have to figure out goalie a bit with Schutte. He's pulled again against Vancouver. A rough game over the weekend. They lost 13-7. Not a great performance. So a good opportunity to bounce back against the Mammoth, who, I mean, they've been, continuing. They've always been high on them at 5-2. Zed Williams, though, just 14 points so far. If he can get going, they could get scary really quickly.
We got Vancouver sliding in there to the 6th spot. I know you want to hit on Albany. Albany.
Albany. Almost forgot about that.
4-4.
Albany,
at number 7. What do you like about the Firewolves?
I like what the impact of Ryan Benesh has made. He's 40 points. That's top 10 in the league. They have the 11th best offense in the league, though, so they need more than that. Joe Nardella, second best faceoff percentage in the league. I mean, for a guy that's been a little bit under the radar when it comes to the NLL, he's been really good at making this transition. A good example for the faceoff guys. We're seeing T.D. Erlin as well do that. The defense production really good by Tony Malcolm and Colton Watkinson, but they looked like at one point in the season they were going to be at the bottom. I mean, I think they were at 13th in our last time we did this, and now they're up to 7th. They've really turned things around, and you could tell they were hungry when they went out to get Benesh. That showed the rest of the guys on the roster, we want to win now. We're going to do this now in our move from New England because they had a good crew there. We're moving them here to Albany, and we're going to be a contender at the end of the year.
I'm glad you mentioned Joe Nardella because an example of a guy who's an American who really put in the work, playing in the Boston Box League, really trying to learn the indoor game, some of the intricacies, at least just get some kind of feel and experience so that when he goes in there, he's not just a guy who's going to win a faceoff. He can feel like he can contribute, whether it's a little bit offensively, some on the defensive end, being able to stay on the floor, because that's the key. Like if you're winning at the faceoff X, you got to do something. You're not going to come right off the floor right away. So I give a lot of credit to a guy like Joe Nardella, and a good lesson for Americans that want to try to play in the NLL, what that roadmap looks like of trying to make your way to it.
Big game at Buffalo this weekend on the 18th, so that will be a big test for them. Joe Resiteritz also should mention him. 47 points in 8 games. That's just under 6 points per game. That's on pace for what he had when he was really cooking 100 points back in 2018. That was with Rochester. So he has helped them invigorate. Like I said, they don't have the best offense, but he has been a big part of that this year and will continue to do so.
So we got Philadelphia at number 8. They're 5-5 after losing to Halifax 10-8. All they do, I think, is play 1 or 2 goal games. The Wings.
Yeah, they make it fun.
they're talented. We mentioned the Rush. We got Rochester at 10 at 3-5. Calgary at number 11 at 2-4.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see Calgary and how they've been able to sort of manage things. And the same thing comes with the offense for them. You know, I think that's been the question with Dane Doby leaving all year long. Like, Jesse King has played well all season. And Zach Currier, he's got the second most loose balls. I think he might have a little chip on his shoulder because Reed Bowering, the rookie coming in here, has more loose balls than Zach Currier of non-face-off guys. So Calgary, I think, could start to put some things together eventually here. But I don't know if that's something they can sustain for a very long time. I don't feel like they're the team that is going to rattle off a lot of wins in a row.
So finally, 13 and 14, we have New York and Panther City. Quickly with Georgia at 12.
Yeah.
They're under 500, and Lyle Thompson leads the league in points. That, to me, is one of the surprises because I kind of figured if you were going to get this Lyle Thompson, you would have a Georgia team that would be a little higher up in the standings. And I know this East is really competitive, but if I'm the Swarm, I'm disappointed with the results so far.
Yeah, I mean, we had thought that going to the season, a lot was going to be put on Lyle Thompson's shoulders.
It's true. It just hasn't been enough.
I mean, right, and he's doing everything possible to deliver them victories. And like you said, they need to get some more help outside of what Lyle's been doing. And sometimes that's just the tail of the tape. That's the way it goes, unfortunately. So you got to have someone else step up there as well.
So there you go. NLL Power Rankings. We'll revisit this in a couple of weeks, see how things shake out.
All right, yeah, we sure will. I think that does it for today's show.
That's all we got.
Wow.
We'll be back here on Thursday as we look ahead to the college weekend. You get us twice a week now, so make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, YouTube. Make sure you check us out on laxsportsnetwork.com as well.
Yeah, and swipe up. That's what they say, right? All the time. Swipe up, and if you can follow us and do all that.
Yeah, on Instagram. Tom, get your stuff right.
I think you can do that on YouTube, too. Like, if you scroll up and you can go and hit the subscribe button. So there's several uses to that. But thank you for watching. And we will see you on Tuesday. For Travis, I'm Tom. Bye, everyone.